dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole? Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is February 3rd, 2015. Wow, how time is flying. Wow. Holy crap. Anyway, what's tonight's topic? What are we going to get into tonight? Well, the past couple days, say the past 2 weeks actually, I've been running around recording videos. Well, not really running around. I happen to be out and about, and I whip out the cell phone and I record what I see in the sky. I've been throwing it up on YouTube, and it's been creating a bit of a discussion in some of the chemtrail and geoengineering groups on Facebook where I posted the video to. What would those be? Well, the videos would be of the sky. It's gotten to the point where they're spraying so blatantly that there's 5, 6, 7 planes in some cases spraying at once. And I'm not talking about contrails. I'm talking about, and I hate the word chemtrail because it's kind of ambiguous with what's being sprayed. You're really not sure. You're just saying it's some sort of chemical, and it may, I guess you could say in a sense it could be a chemical, but maybe it's not a chemical per se. Maybe it's something else. The point is, the term chemtrail kind of has a negative connotation attached to it, you know, and right off the bat, people are, you're one of those people. I like to call it geoengineering or aerial spraying because it's harder to, debunk that. It's harder to use that as a label. It's a little bit more intellectual. Sometimes it makes people think, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, we're going to be discussing that tonight. And about 7:30, I'm going to be joined by my guest for the rest of the evening from 7:30 on until 9, my good friend Michael Murphy, filmmaker and producer behind the movies What and Why in the World Are They Spraying. We're going to be getting into a bunch of different things. I'm going to ask him what's going on as of late, because him and I always talk about what's going on, and we're going to get into that a little bit. The weather manipulation, what they're doing, the trading of it on the stock market, just for the people that aren't sure about that stuff. But I also want to pick his brain about some of the newer stuff that I've noticed. Now, I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I know the sky didn't look like it does now. I don't know if you remember a sky that wasn't filled with white lines and wispy spider-looking clouds and things like that. But I do. I can clearly remember a time. In fact, I remember when I first started paying attention, to be quite honest with you. I remember when I first started paying attention to what's going on. It was back in like the late 90s, which was around the time when the spraying was really noticeable at first. Because they didn't really... I remember the 80s and the early 90s, it wasn't like that. It was, I mean, they might have, and if you look back in their papers, it might go back into like the early 80s where they were doing it randomly here or there. But from what I can remember just off the top of my head, it was about the mid 90s, early to like mid 90s is about when they really started spraying. And it was like late 90s, like when I say like 98, 97, I remember looking up when I would be outside, because I was always outside. And I would look up and I would be working or doing whatever, and I'd be at a job working, looking up going, what the hell is that they're spraying? Like, what is that in the sky? Why is there a straight line across the sky? What is that coming out of the back of those jets? Why does that stay there? That's not normal. That doesn't look normal, but I didn't really have any frame of reference to touch on. So I really didn't understand much about it, right? And then mid-2000s, I had seen things about them spraying things here or there. Randomly on an internet page here or there. But about 2005, 2006 is when around the time that I really woke up to everything, is when I really realized that something was going on. And that this was more than just me, perhaps making something out of nothing. And that there were other people that were seeing the same things and questioning the same thing. So it wasn't just me. Now, to throw an ad hominem attack at somebody and call them a chemtard or something, which is what you're called if you point something out like that. I want people who don't believe in this stuff to think about this for a minute. To just randomly throw out a pejorative label, an attack like that on somebody, an ad hominem attack. Why would you do that? They're just pointing out that there's something in the sky. That you're attacking them so vitriolically. Why? Because you've been programmed to do that. It's the whole point and laugh thing that we were taught at when we were children. We were taught when we were kids that if somebody thinks outside the box in the classroom, because maybe somebody raises their hand in the classroom and questions the teacher, what did the teacher do? The teacher made that person look like a fool, even if that student was actually correct. They'd make the kid look like a fool, and they would program the rest of the students to point and laugh at the student that thought differently. That programming sticks to you when you're an adult. So when someone points something out to you that's outside your box of normal thinking, outside your realm of understanding, you point and laugh. It's actually a Pavlovian response. You shouldn't be proud of that. If you don't know who Pavlov was, you should go look him up. You should not be proud to be having the same programmed response that Pavlov's dogs did. Would you like to have somebody ring a bell and make you drool? Go look up Pavlov's experience. Don't be one of the trained dogs. I'm not making fun of you. I'm trying to explain to you why you react the way you do, because it's non-logical. If you point to the sky, if you look to the sky, you can clearly see something is not right. So you do a little bit of research and you come to find out that, oh my God, they actually are participating in something called geoengineering and weather manipulation. Now, I know a lot of people, I've made videos about this, and I've had people tell me I'm blaspheming against God because man could never have God-like power and manipulate the weather. You don't think that we can manipulate the weather? I'd hate to break the news to you. I know it maybe goes against your religious beliefs because your religious dogma forbids you to look into that. And you think that that's blasphemy that I would even say it because it doesn't exist. God wouldn't allow it. I've actually had this argument thrown at me. Well, I have news for you. It does exist. It does. They've been playing with the weather since the 50s. They started it in the UK. In fact, the British government ended up flooding out as like 2 or 3 towns back in the 50s because they were cloud seeding. That's weather manipulation. Seeding clouds and making it rain is by definition manipulating the weather. There's no semantical argument. I know a lot of people would like to, cloud seeding is... No, it's not. It's not different. Or it's different, Popeye. No. By definition, if you can make a cloud in the sky and make it rain, You just manipulated the weather. No getting around that. Very simple. No side argument necessary. That's weather manipulation. The British government did it back in the 50s and flooded out. It was like 2 or 3 towns they flooded out. Go look it up. Look it up. I mean, the History Channel actually had a show for a series. I think it was for one season. It was called That's Incredible. And one of the episodes was about weather manipulation. They even touched on the fact that the British government flooded out this town in the 50s, or a couple towns in the 50s, because of weather manipulation. During Vietnam, the United States Air Force engaged in something called Project Popeye, ironically. Project Popeye was weather manipulation. See, they dropped, and this is fact, the Air Force dropped more ordnance, and the Marines, Navy, everybody, all the pilots, they dropped more ordnance. They dropped more ordnance in Vietnam than they did all of Europe in World War II. Think about that for a second. They dropped more ordnance in Nam than they did in all of Europe. Go look at the videos where you see those B-29s, the B-24s, the B-17s, and they're all just opening their bomb bay doors at the same time, and you see nothing but bombs. It looks like rain of just bombs. You saw what happened to all those cities, right? We dropped more ordnance trying to take out the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Highway 1, as they called it. The North Vietnamese supply lines. We tried to take that thing out. We dropped more ordnance than in all of Europe in World War II, and we couldn't stop them because they were using ox cart, and they were carrying things on foot because they were guerrilla fighters. It's really hard to fight symmetrical warfare and against asymmetrical warfare, and vice versa. Because you're playing by one set of rules, and the enemy, or whoever, the opposing side, I don't want to say enemy, that's a label, the opposing side is playing by a different set of rules. Anyway, so Project Popeye, what did they do? They go and they seed clouds. They made the monsoon season last, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks longer than normal. And Ben Livingston, he's been interviewed on this. Just go on YouTube and look up Ben Livingston, father of weaponized weather. And the interview will come up, and you can go watch it. Listen to what this guy's got pictures. He talks about cloud seeding. He shows you his accommodations from the military. He went up. They seeded the clouds. They created massive monsoons, and what they couldn't accomplish with all that ordnance, they accomplished with rain, and they flooded out bridges. They flooded out the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They used nature. They used weather warfare. But that doesn't exist, Popeye. That's a conspiracy theory. No, it's actually very real. In fact, it's so real that the UN has a treaty about it. Okay? You can actually just go on Google, okay, and type in UN Treaty on Weather Weapons. And a bunch of links will come up. You can go research it yourself. Okay? This is taken from Article 1 of the treaty. Each state party to this convention undertakes not to engage in military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques having widespread, long-lasting, or severe effects as the means of destruction, damage, or injury to any other state party. Meaning, country A can't use weather warfare against country B. And they all agree to this. You know when this treaty was from? 1977. Hold on, I'll repeat that. 1977. Many of you listening are younger than the treaty is. The treaty is just a couple years younger than I am. This treaty's been around for 37 and a half, well, I guess 37 and 1 month years, right? The end of this year, it'll be 38 years. So 37, 38 years this treaty's been around. Again, taken from Article 1 of the treaty. Each state party to this convention undertakes not to engage in military or any other hostile use of environmental modification. But let me repeat that. Use of environmental modification techniques having widespread, long-lasting, or severe effects as the means of destruction, damage, or injury to any other state party. How about Article 2? This is a piece from Article 2. It is the understanding of the committee that the following examples are illustrative of phenomena that could be caused by the use of environmental modification techniques as defined in Article 2 of the Convention. Earthquakes, tsunamis, an upset in the ecological balance of a region, changes in weather patterns, i.e. clouds, precipitation, cyclones of various types, and tornadic storms, changes in climate patterns, changes in ocean currents, changes in the state of the ozone layer itself, and changes in the state of the ionosphere. That's from the treaty, the UN Treaty on Weather Modification. For all you people that say, it doesn't exist, there's no proof. The treaty's from 1977, geniuses. Go research it. It's not fake. It's not conspiracy theorist conjecture. It's real. They're telling you. Again, this is from Article 2. I'll read it again. It is the understanding of the committee that the following examples are illustrative of phenomena that could be caused by the use of environmental modification techniques as defined in Article 2 of the Convention. Earthquakes, tsunamis, an upset in the ecological balance of a region, changes in weather patterns, i.e. clouds, precipitation, cyclones of various types, and tornadic storms. Makes you think of all those nasty tornadoes we had in the Midwest a couple of years ago. Change in climate patterns, change in ocean currents, changes in the state of the ozone layer. Oh my God, remember the 80s? Oh my God, there's a hole in the ozone layer from Calfart's SUVs and Aquanet hairspray. And changes in the state of the ionosphere itself, what is HARP? Which now is defunct. They have other facilities and they have other, they have smaller versions of that very same scalar technology. But what did HARP do? HARP actually moved the ionosphere up. They could manipulate the ionosphere, create a dome inside the ionosphere and push certain sections of it up. It did other things too. In fact, you can go look it up. The first time they being the people that have, let's say, become the whistleblowers on HARP back in the day. And I even think Bernard Eastland, the guy who had the patents for it, might have talked about this. But it's come out, and the research is there, whether you believe it or not. But it's come out that the first time that they fired HARP up was a little too powerful when they were trying to heat the ionosphere. And that's what punched the hole through the ozone layer. What does it say right here again in this treaty? And everybody says that's crazy. What does it say here in the treaty? Changes in the state of the ozone layer. The treaty is from 1977. When did the quote-unquote hole in the ozone layer appear? Back in the 80s when I was a kid. Like 81, 82. Very interesting. Wonder if they were dicking with weather modification back then. Of course they were. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. They totally were. Use those big brains I know you all have inside of your heads. I know you can all understand this. This is very simple and easy to understand. Okay? Very, very simple and easy to understand. Weather modification is very real. I mean, the UN treaty is right there in your face. A lot of people, again, will say, I don't believe in that. Well, you don't have to believe in gravity either, but if you jump off the nearest tall object, it'll take effect. Right? So it doesn't matter if you believe that these people are actually spraying it or not. They are. Your belief has nothing to do with it. That's the problem. People hear information, and because it may be shocking to them or against something that they a belief that they hold true that helps them through the day, that makes them feel comfortable. If you tell them something that takes them out of that comfort level, a lot of times, in fact, most of the time, the argument against you that no, you're wrong. It comes from that person thinking that they know and that their version of whatever they know, their perception, is the absolute truth of what's happening, and that you can't possibly be right because what you're telling them shakes their foundation to the core. Ladies and gentlemen, your personal beliefs in anything have nothing to do with anything. Okay, you don't have to believe in geoengineering or weather modification. Like I said, I've had people comment on videos and stuff and articles I've done and shows I've done and say, you're lying, this doesn't exist, blah, 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 you're just a conspiracy retard. It does exist. Again, the UN treaty goes back to 1977, people. So to think that in 2015 they don't have the technology a little bit more advanced is asinine. They were cloud seeding in the 50s. They were modifying the weather in the 50s. It's 2015. How come you can believe that you can have a cell phone that can stream video to it, that 20 years ago, if you told us that you'd be able to talk on video Skype or have a cell phone, you would have been like, no, that's science fiction. You're crazy. That's nut talk. The only place I ever see that is in, science fiction movies like Total Recall or on the Sci-Fi Channel. Well, Sci-Fi Channel didn't even exist back then, okay? You'd only hear it in, science fiction novels or see it in a movie about a science fiction, whatever story. And what happened? Now it's a reality. Now your cell phone can make pancakes for you if you'd like. You can surf the internet. You can listen to radio. You can video conference with your family from your phone. And they could be thousands of miles away. They could be across the world. So how come it's okay to believe that? It's okay to believe that, we have satellites in outer space. We can remotely control a rover on Mars. You believe that they can remotely control. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying you'll believe that. That's completely scientifically acceptable, that they can remotely pilot something that is on another planet, but to think that they might be able to manipulate the weather on our very own planet, that's just crazy talk, Popeye. How dare you say that? That totally blows my mind and takes me out of my comfort zone, because weather scares the crap out of people, because it's one of those things you can't run from. It's not like if there's a hurricane coming in or a tornado, you can be like, well, I'm going to protest it. I'm not afraid of you, tornado. Your power has nothing to do with me. Now step off, like you would the New World Order D-bags, right? You can't do that because a tornado will just come over and go, and you'll be a memory. Right? Weather is scary. That's why people, I think, are really afraid to accept this, because that's a scary thought. You mean they're manipulating the ecological system on the planet? They're dicking with water and weather patterns? They're changing the currents? They're making things melt on purpose, like some of the ice caps? You ever wonder about that? You ever wonder if some of the, oh my God, there's ice melting. Maybe when the ice does melt, I know there's natural cycles and there's ice being built. But what if maybe they were melting things on purpose for a while? Maybe what if they're screwing with the weather so that they can say, look, oh my God, the weather's crazy. We need this, that, and the other thing. They're mad scientists, ladies and gentlemen. The B movies, the science flicks that we watched when we were kids, these mad scientist B movies that you'd see on like TBS and TNT and USA Up All Night with Rhonda Shear, for all of those that are my age, okay? We'd see these horrible movies on at 3 o'clock in the morning, right, with the lamest, stupidest mad scientist plot ever, and you'd be like, this is just so insane, like never happens. Except actually it is happening. These people are actually running things, and they're the ones that are doing things. I was just on RAS Radio Live, Sean Raspatello, friend of mine, and good broadcast. Go check him out over on his website, thefirst52.com. I think it's tf52.com and rasradiolive.com. You could find him. It'll just redirect you to it. But we were talking about this, and he asked me if I thought they were spraying vaccines and stuff in there. No, I don't. I think that from that height at like 30,000 feet or even a little higher, or even in like the 20,000 zone, it's just too high. Sunlight could screw things up. Wind patterns, it's just too high. I don't think it would have an effect. Now, if they were spraying from like 1,500 to 2,000 feet up like they do with insecticides and stuff, then yeah, I would say that would probably have more of an effect. And usually that's what they do. If they're going to spray germs or anything or viruses on people, they don't go at 30,000 feet. So I don't think that the high altitude spraying has anything to do with that. I think it's more to do with the weather manipulation itself and the ecological system. I don't really think it has, even the Morgellon stuff, I don't know if they're spraying that or if that's from vaccine. They could be spraying it, but again, if that stuff's being sprayed, I think it's more lower level spraying, meaning not high altitude, not at 30,000 feet. And it could be. They might be spraying it at 30,000 feet. But I think anything biological like that, they wouldn't want to go that high up. I just think there's too many variables and things that would get in the way. I'll ask Mike about that. Take note. I have to ask him about that. But I don't think that they're spraying anything like that at that height. I think if anything, they would have to spray that at a much lower height. I think the high altitude spraying has everything to do with weather modification, manipulation of the ionosphere, manipulation of the air currents and the water vapor currents. There's more to it. I mean, they trade weather on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So, I mean, if the rain at the Midwest normally has, let's say, would produce like a really good crop, but I'm betting that crop is going to fail, and I know that the weather can be manipulated to make the crop fail, and I bet millions and millions of dollars that the crop will fail, and then the crop fails, I make millions of dollars. It's not about feeding people. They don't even care about getting that food into the system to feed hungry kids. They don't care about that. They don't care about feeding hungry people. They'd rather just make money off of that crop failing. That's twisted. Extremely sick and twisted. Anyway, we're going to break. Michael Murphy will be joining me, hopefully in a few short minutes. We'll get into more geoengineering, weather manipulation. Look up, ladies and gentlemen, because it's actually going on. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, last segment I was kind of giving a brief historical overview, and it's extremely brief, of geoengineering and weather manipulation. And I had mentioned the UN Weather Treaty. If you go over to the chat room, I just dropped the link. You can actually download a PDF of the treaty from the Carnegie Endowment, of all people. The irony. Anyway, you can go actually right to pretty much the New World Order itself and download a PDF where it shows you all about the UN Weather Weapons Treaty. So go ahead and download that and read it, and then the next time someone says to you, and I urge you to download the PDF and actually print it out, because that way the next time someone says to you in a debate or a conversation, oh, geoengineering is not real, geoengineering is fake, you actually can hand them the treaty, or at least if you want, maybe try to find sections of it. Maybe if the PDF is too long, maybe make it, just one page, but take sections of it out, and then maybe put on the bottom, put a link where they can download the thing or whatever. Upload it to your website, make a link to people to download it and hand it out. People need to see that this is real, that this is not fake. That's why one of the reasons I wanted to drop that PDF in there. People are saying in the chat room it says page not available. Okay, well, it was from the Carnegie Endowment, so what do you expect? Do this. Try to find the way. There's plenty of smart individuals out there that listen to this radio show. You're all good, awesome researchers in your own right. Look it up. See if you can find it. If you can, drop it in the chat. Drop it, message it to me on Facebook, whatever. And if you give me a good PDF for it, not only will I drop it, well, you're going to have it in the chat. I'll just take it. I'll put it on Facebook, tweet it out, but I'll actually put a link. I'll make a widget for it on the side of Federal Jack and just put a direct link to the PDF itself. In fact, if you can find me the PDF, I'll host it on Federal Jack and just make it easier for everybody to download it. So out there, researchers, do me a favor. Try to find a good working link to the UN Weather Weapons Treaty. The one I had I thought worked, but I guess not. Anyway, I don't want to waste any more time because my guest is on the line with us. I talked about, like I said, a brief historical overview. I discussed the Project Popeye. I discussed the British using weather modification in the 50s and accidentally flooding out 3 of their towns. Go back if you didn't hear the first segment. I want to bring my guest, Mr. Michael J. Murphy, on, the producer and director of What and Why in the World Are They Spraying? 2 very informative documentaries about geoengineering and weather manipulation. I want to pick his brain tonight, ladies and gentlemen, not only about the stuff that Mike and I have gone over in the past, but there's a few other things like, are they melting the global ice caps, or have they done it in the past on purpose? I actually kind of mentioned this a little bit in the first segment, but I want to pick Mike's brain on it. Anyway, without further ado, I want to bring him back to the airwaves, ladies and gentlemen. My good friend, Mr. Michael J. Murphy. Mike, welcome back, brother.
Thanks for having me on. As always, thank you for covering this issue, which now is starting to get more interest, at least in the public eye. So we're making progress. A lot of exciting things going on. God, it's probably been almost a year and a half since I've been on. So glad to be back. I'll cut through the chase. Glad to be back. Thanks.
It's glad to have you back, and it's always an honor to have you on. Let's hop right into the fracas first. I kind of gave a brief overview, but since I mentioned the UN Weather Treaty, I mean, do you think as an activist that's been doing this and a researcher and someone that's been, pointing this out for years now, don't you think that that's a good place to start with when people say, oh, there's no proof or there's no evidence? You can show the treaty from the UN where they're talking about weather manipulation. Thoughts?
It's one of the literally hundreds, or if not thousands, of things that we can present to the public. The evidence is all over the place. And I think you're talking about the ENMOD Treaty, which was passed back, I believe, in 1972, if I'm not mistaken. We included that in Why in the World Are They Spraying? And yeah, it was definitely passed. But as Nick Begich, when we interviewed Dr. Nick Begich, of course, he wrote Angels Don't Play This Harp, excellent book, and really related how HARP is involved with weather control, and also the possibility, he said possibility, we're very aware that chemtrails or geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering is definitely a big part of, or was a big part of the HARP program. I believe it's been privatized now. A lot of people think it was shut down, but I believe it was privatized. And not to mention there are a number of new technologies, probably things that we're not even aware of, that have come into play that can change certain things, the RF energy, in our sky. But yeah, very important. The ENMOD Treaty, what I was getting to, had it had, and I'm trying to think of the word here. It had an exemption, and that exemption gave countries the ability to utilize this technology over their own land. So, we spoke about this many times. When you manipulate weather, Scott Stevens, who is on Why in the World Are They Spraying, spoke about working with the storm. And to develop certain weather systems, you work several thousand miles out. So let's say if they're trying to build a big system that would come into California, of course they're not doing it now, you start working out, by Hawaii. And over time, if you seed the cloud enough or start building the front, then you can have a massive storm go into that area. So if you're using, or you want to use weather warfare against Japan or somewhere in Europe, you can start building over the U.S. And of course, the weather fails to recognize the exemption on the treaty or those landmarks or, the boundaries, the country boundaries. And of course, it goes right over. And that's what we think is part of that, but probably something much larger. And that's the U.S. military and the entire industrial complex. And there's no question that geoengineering as a whole has been used for many, many different purposes. And but yes, the ENMOD Treaty would be a very good place to start. Of course, I say utilize both what and Why in the World Are They Spraying. You can go to whyintheworldarethayspraying.com for more information. We encourage everybody to get a copy, and then encourage everybody who orders a copy to make as many copies as you can. Hand them out. They're very effective activism tools. And, of course, we've included both films on YouTube. So please send those out to your email list. Get them out on your social media. Very important tool for us. So, yeah, that would be a very good starting point to just get an understanding what's happening above us. And in many cases, geoengineering is not only limited to chemtrails. So I've been looking at some other areas in my studies.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I have seen other things as well, which we're going to get into. So first thing I want to ask you, because we discussed this multiple times that you've been on, and you brought this up in the second film, and I mentioned this. They can spray, not only can they seed clouds, but they can also spray desiccant into the air, which for people that don't understand what that is, it would like dry the air out. And it would keep the weather, it would actually, in many cases, it would keep the water vapor floating up in the atmosphere rather than raining down upon the earth as rain, which would then feed to earth and grow crops. And that's what I was talking about. They'll bet on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that crops will fail or whatever, and then they make tons of money off it. It's not even about feeding the hungry people or the poor people. It's about these scumbags making money and then manipulating the weather to do so. I mean, they're playing mad scientist in one aspect, which you don't know what kind of repercussions from playing with the weather is going to have, and then they're betting on it and making money. I mean, so yes, it does exist. So thinking in that aspect and talking about that, the river of water vapor, you've talked about this before with me. Do you think they're still doing that? Is that part of the drought problem in California currently that's going on right now?
Is that part of the drought problem? That is, I believe, 100% of the drought problem. And if you look at the jet stream right now, we have what's called the polar vortex. And meteorologists are just scratching their head going, we've never seen anything like this. And what it's doing, it's creating high pressure off of California. So typically when the jet stream comes in, it should deposit moisture in Northern California and above. And that's the wet season, very good growing. So typically they get a lot of moisture in that area because there's been an artificial, and I can get into the mechanics if you'd like, and how they create that high. What it's doing is diverting the jet stream. So it's going up into the Arctic region. A couple of reasons. Drought is very, very profitable. And if we look at it just from the drought standpoint in terms of California, what it appears, we've heard what you said, the scumbag elites, they stated that water was one of the resources that they're going to go after. And of course, when there's an abundance of water and when there's natural water, there's no reason for the government to come in. However, during a shortage, through public-private partnerships, Agenda 21, they go in and they take that water. I've been looking at one company in particular, Bechtel. Bechtel owns about 82% of the world's privatized water. They're also a major military industrial complex corporation. So they're involved in a lot of nefarious activities, and it appears that they're a major part in terms of involvement with these programs. But getting back to the drought, another reason why I believe that California is being droughted out. If you go back about 5 years ago, the Central Valley of California produced about 50% of the United States fruits and vegetables. And this was 5 or 6 years ago. Through Agenda 21 and through the Endangered Species Act, they literally cut off the water to the Central Valley, sourcing that the delta smelt was going to become extinct. So through this, I would say it's phony environmentalism, they were able to cut off some of the canals that go into that area. And of course, it dried up a lot of farms. Many of those farmers went out of business. The ones that were able to get water or some water, now everything's drying up. What does that do? Well, it dries up 50% of the fruits and vegetables in that region, dries up food prices. But what it does, if you look at it from the standpoint of global government, it makes the U.S. interdependent with other countries. So now we are interdependent. We're getting avocados from Chile. We're getting things from Mexico. We're importing all of these fruits and vegetables. And because of that interdependence, what does that do? Well, you get a UN or some other global body that says, wow, U.S. is getting fruits and vegetables and trading around the world. We have to create global governance. So I believe that's another reason for that. But if you look at the article that I just wrote, and this was, I would say, it's a very important article because it's the direction that we're going. It's called Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic. And I want to get in, before I get into why I believe the jet stream is being diverted into that area, I think it'd be probably a good idea to go into this article, and then we'll get into what my theory is in terms of why the jet stream is up there. But Popeye, there's no question that the jet stream is being diverted into that area. And what's happening? It's going up into the Arctic, bringing all of this warm moisture into the Arctic, and now I'm in the Midwest, and I've been here for about 10 months. I was in California, in Maui, Hawaii, very warm climates. Now I'm here in the Arctic, cold Chicago with about 17 or 18 inches of snow on the ground. It's a unique experience, but it's very cold. And one of the reasons for that, and it was a very cold summer, I did grow up here as a child, but the jet stream is diverting. It's going into the Arctic, and then, of course, its natural rebound brings it back into the Midwest. So we're getting all of this moisture, and we're getting very cold temperatures. Again, a very cold summer and very cold past, I believe, 18 months from what I'm hearing. So a couple of reasons for that. But would you like me to get into the article, Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic?
Yeah, and if you want, you could also get into the mechanics of how they're keeping the water vapor and everything up there. You can get as detailed as you want. I'll tell you how long we got before break. We have about 11 and a half minutes, so you can have the floor until we go to break if you need to. So whatever you want to pick up first, the mechanics, or if you want to get into the article.
You know what, probably the mechanics, because I think that will give the audience just a good idea of how the aerosols react. If we go back to geoengineering programs, if we look what we're finding and what we covered and why in the world are they spraying was massive amounts of aluminum, barium, and strontium. These are considered the chemtrail-geoengineering footprint. So scientists started taking rain samples, and I'm really cutting through the chase. There are a lot of details here that I could get involved with, but I think it's important to move on. And I think your audience is pretty well versed on this. We've been on several times, and I think they're more awake than most audiences. But now, anyways, this chemtrail-geoengineering footprint, what we found the most of was aluminum. And when I wrote my first article, which was What in the World Are They Spraying?, it actually led to the first film. I uncovered aluminum being found in rainwater tests, and of course, that article came out of me being at the American Association for the Advancement of Science meeting. That was a geoengineering conference. And geoengineers for a long time have been talking about spraying sulfur into the sky, and the idea was to mimic volcanoes, right? So volcanoes spew up sulfur and many other things. And what they noticed when there were huge eruptions throughout history, it would cool the planet because the sun would be blocked out. So here are geoengineers at the meeting. They're talking about putting aluminum oxide for the first time. Ding, ding, light went off, or light went on in many of our heads, and we said, wow, that's what we're finding in the rainwater tests. There's the link to geoengineering. So geoengineers state aluminum would be a very effective metal and very toxic to human health in both ecosystems. That's why we're seeing ecosystem collapses and aluminum-related illnesses. These are nanoparticles that they're spraying. So when they put them up there, they say, oh, maybe a couple of years, but they absolutely come down into the air that we breathe. They pass right past the blood-brain barrier because they're nanoparticles, about 1/10 of a micron, if not smaller. So they're very small, and that makes them even more toxic, but we can get into that more. But aluminum, so they say aluminum, again, is lightweight and it's very reflective, so it would be a very effective particle to put into our sky. What we found, it's also a very effective conductor. So what they have the ability to do, and we'll get into the desiccants. You can spray barium. Barium has a couple of different applications. Barium is a desiccant, so you can actually kill a storm and utilize other technologies. You can also spray black soot, something that has been admitted. It's a form of geoengineering to build clouds, or as you said, to be used as a desiccant to destroy clouds. So there are a number of different things and different technologies. And you can even, with the HARP system, you can take a storm and you can change the ionization, and the storm will fall apart immediately. So Scott Stevens spoke about that. He was a 20-year award-winning weatherman, and he came on and he was very well aware of the chemtrails issue and how geoengineering relates to our changing weather. Of course, everybody's aware that our weather is dramatically changing. So getting back to this, so a storm front can be built depending on what you put into a storm. Certain particles will actually act as what's called cloud condensation nuclei. So the idea is putting these particles into the sky, and typically when we have moisture that builds, moisture will evaporate, let's say over the ocean. Eventually it will rise and combine on other water molecules, and eventually when it gets heavy enough, it'll fall as rain. These particles, they can put certain particles up there so the moisture will hold on for a longer time, thus building a storm. So again, you can create a river, sort of, the idea is to create a stream of moisture and direct it just as you would a river, depending on what you spray into it. But what's very interesting to me was the idea of aluminum oxide, okay, and the fact that it's a conductor in our sky. And what we noticed, about 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours ahead of a big storm system, those were the days when they trailed the most, back and forth, literally blocking out the sun. Those are the days when people had burning eyes, irritability, nausea, headache, complaining of a lot of respiratory issues. Barium's very high on those days. I spoke with some emergency room physicians who said, our ERs are packed during heavy spray days, people coming in with heart attacks. Barium increases our blood pressure, so that's one of the symptoms. But, I think many people can tell when they have the burning eyes and very irritable during those days. But anyways, what they do is they create this big blanket of metal particulate in the sky, and through the HARP system or other technology, they, again, heat that metal up in the sky. And when you heat part of the sky up, what does it do? It raises up. And when it raises, it literally creates a low-pressure vacuum. So sky goes up, it sucks storms right into certain regions, or in the case of California, out of certain regions. So it's a very effective and very basic technology in terms of how you can control weather in certain areas. So it's very concerning to us, though, because it's very destructive. And of course, when you divert a jet stream in one area, there's going to be an offset in another area. And back in the 70s, scientists were talking about this, and they were talking about the species extinction rate possibly going through the roof because, again, certain insects, certain aquatic bugs, and even certain animals need a natural rain pattern. And when that's diverted, you're going to have all kinds of offsets. And that's absolutely what we're seeing right now. I'm not sure what the extinction rate is, but it's literally through the roof, and I can get that number for you next time. So, Popeye, just based on that, it's a big concern. But we looked into, of course, you spoke about people making money on this. So when we produced Why in the World Are They Spraying, we looked at various reasons for weather control. And I think like most people, when I first heard about it, I said, why would anybody want to control the weather? It doesn't make sense. And that was what kind of, that was when the light went on, because I started asking questions and I started getting answers, which really concerned me. And at the very least, like you said, people can make money on it. And the idea is we went to Chicago and we interviewed a trader, and we spoke about weather derivatives. And my jaw dropped because literally weather is being traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I was like, weather is traded? Are you kidding me? And he said, yeah, they're traded in the form of derivatives. And it actually started back in the 90s, the early 90s. Our favorite company, Enron, and God knows that a lot of that paperwork was probably lost when the Twin Towers collapsed or when Building 7 collapsed. I believe Enron was Enron in Building 7, Popeye?
Enron and a bunch of other stuff. But yes, all the files from all the rolling brownouts that they did, where they did so just to make tons of – there was no reason that they did that. It was just to make more money so they could charge more for electricity. That was it.
Right. So a lot going on. But anyways, Enron traded our first weather derivative. And what a company will do, Michael Agney, did just a great job at explaining to us, a company will offset the risk due to weather. So he explained, like, let's say if you're a heating company and you need X number of days to be below 30 degrees in the wintertime, and it's a particularly warm winter like they're having. Well, a company has the ability to offset the risk by purchasing these weather derivatives. Another example he used was a giant seed company, and the idea was, let's say if you have $10 million worth of seed that you planted, but you insure it for $20 million and your crop fails, he said you can literally double your money. And that's what really started making sense. And I'm not saying every trader who trades weather derivatives is part of weather control or supporting this. However, we are aware of insider trading, and the fact of the matter is there are some people who literally know what the long-term game plan is in terms of weather, and if you have the playbook, you can't fail. You literally have the ability to make millions, if not billions of dollars, just on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And that's playing with weather derivatives. So there are a lot of different motives, and I would say that's probably the lowest in terms of effective ways to consolidate an enormous amount of both money and power. The other thing that most people, I think, are kind of aware of is owning the weather by 2025, and that's a stated goal by our military. And the idea is essentially controlling the weather to give militaries a battlefield advantage. So the idea is, if you can create sandstorms in Iraq so that, during an Iraqi invasion so that the enemy can't get off of the ground, then you can literally have a battlefield advantage. And I remember, Popeye, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, somebody at church said, "Oh my God, Iraq is getting slammed with these sandstorms. Wow, God is really on the side of the U.S." And that was before I was aware of the weather technologies and the ability to literally manipulate weather in such a manner. But now looking back on it, there's no question in my mind that was absolutely used. Getting more into the military technologies. Let's say if you're a military and you want to wage war against the country. However, it's not the public would not be so supportive of that. It's a very effective tool for war. And the idea is you can literally drought out a country. You can destabilize nations without firing a shot. And
how many earthquakes has Iran had, Mike?
Oh God!
You know what I mean?
I haven't been counting.
They have earthquake tech. They have technology that can cause earthquakes. It says it right in the UN treaty. And it was 1977 when it was completely ratified and everybody was signed on to it by 1977. And here you have where they say that they can cause earthquakes. And how many earthquakes has Iran had over the course of time, over the past since the Shah was thrown out? How many earthquakes have they had? And look at the time when the earthquake happened and see what was going on politically, and see if there's any correlation. Same thing with China. China will have earthquakes. Don't think that they actually adhere to this UN weather weapons treaty, because they totally do not at all. The break's going to sneak up on us, Mike. We got about 45 seconds, so I'm going to pause us right here. Ladies and gentlemen, when we get back, we have another hour with Mike. Make sure you go check out his films. What and why in the world are they spraying? I've got one up on DTRH Radio. In fact, I've got them both up on DTRH Radio Archives on the YouTube channel. You can find them also on Mike's YouTube channel. Just go on YouTube and type in what in the world are they spraying, or why in the world are they spraying, for the first two films. We got another hour. Stay tuned. More on geoengineering and weather manipulation. It is real. Deal with it. Let's face it and figure something out, how to deal with this appropriately, like adults. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. It's February 3rd, 2015. We're discussing geoengineering and weather manipulation with my good friend, Michael Murphy, filmmaker and producer behind What and Why in the World Are They Spraying? And I believe Mike has a third film coming out, which we're going to get into later on. And a few other things I feel are kind of pertinent. It's important to talk about. But first, we're going to stick with the info. Second half of the second hour here, we're going to get into a few other things. And even the behind the scenes attacks, just like we all face, that we go through in telling the truth. At one point or another, we all face personal attacks on us to try to destroy our character, and Mike has gone through that, and we're going to cover that too. But first, I want to stay focused on the technical information. Now, in the first hour, I mentioned when I was going off in the first half hour of the first hour of the broadcast, by the way, if you didn't hear it, go back in the archives over at TFR or over at FederalJack.com and listen to the broadcast. But during that first hour, I mentioned, could they possibly be melting or have in the past melted the Arctic ice caps on purpose? Now, we all know that right now the ice caps have ice growing, and that there is actually more ice forming. In fact, I believe there was a record amount of ice recently formed. But when in the past they have melted, people have always said, well, it could have been part of a cycle, which, okay, very well could be. But what if they manipulated things and did certain things to speed up said cycle or maybe enhance the melting cycle for different reasons, including to back up their whole, we need a one world government because of global warming and spookiness. And remember, the idea of weather being mankind affecting the weather and that being a huge problem goes back to the 70s. People like Kissinger and others, their little think tanks. Anyway, let's get back to the guest. I want to bring Michael back, and I want to get into an article that he's got discussing this very topic. So, Mike, what is this article? What's the title, where it's from, and what is it about?
Well, it's titled Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic. And we've been covering geoengineering for such a long time and looking at the way that our weather, without question, is being manipulated. Some of the effects and some of the ways to consolidate an enormous amount of power. Of course, we got into military a little bit before, and we got into the derivative claim, but it also relates to genetically modified crops. And the idea is if you create a drought in a certain area, crops won't grow. You can actually, there's a new seed. It's an abiotic, stress-resistant, genetically modified seed, which will grow in this new environment that's created by geoengineering. So abiotic stress is anything that stresses the soil. It's heavy metal contamination. It's too much moisture, fungal overgrowth because our sun is blocked out now. The earth is receiving 20% less sunlight. We have fungal overgrowth and a lot of illness for that. And there's a new Monsanto-designed genetically modified seed that will grow in this new environment. So it's literally a hostile takeover of our entire food supply. And I live on an organic farm in Maui part of the year, and we've lost about 50% of our ability to get our crops. And another farmer that we know, and this is kind of standard around the island, 70% crop loss in the past 10 years. So there's an enormous crop loss. But these
let me ask you something about Hawaii. I want to interrupt you for a second. I know I normally don't do this, but when I remember about a year or two ago, didn't they just pass some law that's illegal, or at least Hawaii did? I think not just one island, but didn't all of them pass a thing against geoengineering and weather manipulation over the islands and destroying their crops? So if they did, then what are they going to actively do now that they're still being sprayed?
We're actually still working on that. So we just banned GMOs from the island. So I had an opportunity to work on that last winter, and that bill passed. So we're utilizing, because geoengineering is a little more tricky, and the only reason is GMO foods, genetically modified seeds. Monsanto is on the island. There's no question they're doing it, right? So Monsanto is trying to push these seeds, saying, "Oh, they're healthy. We're here to feed the world." And there's no question that they are not here to feed the world. They're here to control the world and control the world's food supply. No question about that. So what we did and what we're doing right now, we're using the same successes that we had on the GMO bill, applying that to our new bill. So I'm hoping to get back to Maui pretty soon. I know next weekend we're going to be working on that with some of the leaders. Bruce Douglas of Maui Skywatch I'm going to be meeting with him. So we're going to be taking, steps in the necessary directions. But that is a bill that we're hopeful to get passed, and we're also working on a number of other things. So with that being said, the GMO seeds, very much of Kissinger said, if you control the oil, you can control nations. If you control the food, you can control the people. And we are all aware that that is a major, major part of the agenda here. So that's just a huge part of this. So it's also, geoengineering is a means to form global governance. And the idea here, and the way that geoengineers are now selling this, and they've been having a lot of meetings talking about this, is, well, because geoengineering gives man godlike power, and that's a quote from geoengineer David Keith, he said there would be wars over whose hand should be on the thermostat. And because of this, we will have to develop global governance. And they are moving very quickly in developing the framework. There's no question about this. The framework to form a global government body to, quote unquote, monitor these programs. And what's even more scary, Popeye, listening to the geoengineers talking about the the fact, and there's no question that geoengineering will create droughts and floods in other areas. These are not my words. These are the words of geoengineers. What they're saying, because it offsets weather patterns, we're also going to have to use these programs to control the weather and determine what countries get rain, what countries don't. And what was interesting, when I listened to geoengineers talk a little more, they were talking about offering incentives for countries to sign on to these geoengineering treaties. And they didn't talk about what incentives they were, but my guess is they were probably who would get rain. And of course, a country that doesn't sign on to this would get droughted out, just like we're seeing in Africa. You had mentioned Iran and a number of other things. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Defense Secretary Cohen had mentioned, and I believe he was with Ronald Reagan, or this was back in, I think 82 or 89, mentioned the fact that there's a new type of eco-terrorism, and that they have the ability to create floods in certain areas, change our weather, and even create earthquakes. So there's no question this technology exists. It's just not being promoted on your Fox News or your NBC News and everything else. And if people really, I think, understood the gravity of this issue and how damaging these programs were, I think we would have a revolution tomorrow. And that was one of my, my greatest hopes for producing most films. They've had exposure, to millions and millions of people and really gained an awareness with the issue. However, we're still very short. A recent poll came out which indicates that, or clearly showed, and this was about a year and a half old, that 8% of the population is now aware of geoengineering programs. That tells us that 92% of the population is completely unaware of this issue. And it's exciting in one aspect, and the reason for that is the critical mass. Critical mass is defined at the percentage of the population before the majority of the population accepts your issue to be truth. And anything less than 10%, it's very unlikely that this issue will catch on. So we're right at about critical mass, and that's 10%. When we hit 10%, we should see the dynamics dramatically change. Of course, the closer we get to this number, all kinds of resistance, not only from outside, but also from within the movement. So we see all these dynamics, which I think every movement has experienced, but it tells me that we're getting closer. So I say that as a word of encouragement, and again, the dynamics are going to dramatically change. However, we spoke about geoengineering legislation. Geoengineers are moving very quickly for legislation. And getting into my article, that's really the reason I started taking a different turn, because this year we have climate meetings. Of course, the Obama administration just cut a deal with, I believe it was China. Yes, it was. It was China, and it was a climate deal. What they're trying to do, and we believe, I call it the dance in France. What they're trying to do is create a global government body in a treaty with some of the main players, the main countries, to quote-unquote curb emissions. And it's all based on this belief system that CO2 is the cause of global warming. And when we look at global warming, scientists source a couple of things to prove, or they say that proves CO2 is global warming. They talk about the Arctic ice melting. Well, hey, the Arctic ice is melting. Of course it has to be CO2. And then they talk about our adverse weather conditions. And there's no question that geoengineering changes our weather. Does it change the Arctic ice melt? Well, let's examine that a little bit. And again, I know it's right now it's debatable whether the ice is coming back or not. And my article wasn't based on that, but it was based on looking back into the 70s and what the dynamics in the Arctic were. And there was a scientist called Stephen Schneider back in the 70s. And he said, oh my God, we're going into an ice age. What should we do? Well, an ice age could create a national security issue, kind of what the Obama administration now is saying, quote unquote, about supposed global warming or climate change. We'll get to that in a minute. But he was saying what we need to do is deal with this issue, again, because it's a security threat and it could really change the way that we want to live. And I'm cutting through the chase. So what did he propose? He said, well, what we could do is a couple of things. We need to melt the Arctic ice. So he proposed a couple of things, which they definitely did. One of those things was spraying black soot over the Arctic. And the idea is putting black soot on ice, and of course it would absorb more heat. More heat on ice, of course, creates melt. Well, we took pictures of the Arctic. It looks like a paved highway, man. There's hundreds and hundreds of miles of this big, thick blackness. Of course, they're sourcing. They denied that they've sprayed black soot literally onto the Arctic. They're saying that stuff came from China and came from automobiles, all kinds of other things.
Is that the infamous
I
black chemtrails that I've heard people talk about, and I've been sent videos because people have seen them elsewhere. So I'm just wondering, maybe they expanded the use of that to other parts of the country. Could that be what people are seeing, you think?
Absolutely. I found documentation, geoengineering, and it has been since the 70s. There's papers admitting that they've sprayed it for the purpose of weather modification and weather control. No question about it. So yeah, black soot is one of the geoengineering practices. There's no question that they've been spraying it up in the Arctic. And of course, how does a little bit of ash and everything else get so thick on that ice? Whatever the question is, there's no question about it. Black soot is melting the ice. They proposed it, denied that they were doing it. There's the evidence. So let's move on to the other things that they were saying. We now have a huge ozone hole up in the Arctic, and geoengineering programs in itself, geoengineers spoke about this, our programs will deplete the ozone. And many people now, they notice in the sunshine they're getting more hot. They burn easier. The UV indexes are going through the roof. Why? Well, geoengineering. Anytime you put a particle in the sky, if you remember back in the 80s, they said, no, we can't use aerosols because it wrecks the ozone. No question about it. However, on a day-to-day basis, you see the trails going back and forth, back and forth. Every time they do that, it depletes our ozone. However, there's something that's more effective at depleting our ozone. So this guy Schneider said, well, we could also spray chlorine into the Arctic area and deplete the ozone in that area. And the idea is to, again, destroy a protective layer and the sun would be stronger. Again, we have a huge hole above the Arctic area. That's melting, or was at one time melting the ice. Then they even proposed detonating nuclear bombs in the region. Of course, the idea is if you detonate a nuclear bomb, it's going to create heat, thus melting the Arctic. And then there was a third thing, and I'm just getting used to speaking about this. I think you're my third or fourth article. Okay, so we spoke about nuclear bombs. There have been over 123 nuclear bombs detonated in that region, no question, melted the Arctic. And we spoke about the jet stream, but I want to get into that in a minute. So this guy, Stephen Schneider, back in the 70s, putting out this huge alarm that we need to melt the Arctic ice started to melt. What did he do? Less than 10 years later, totally reversed his stance and said, oh my God, the Arctic ice is melting. CO2 is causing global warming. We have to deal with this. We have to do cap and trade. We have to tax people. We have to form world government. So there are a lot of consequences that come with this. Let me get back, though, before I move forward, on to why they would want to melt the ice. Do you know why they would want to melt the ice?
I'm sure it would. Okay, I'm sure it would alter the ecosystem. I'm sure it would, if they melted enough, perhaps it would raise the water levels. I'm sure it would bring in enough catastrophic stuff that they'd be able to scare people and bring about a one world government.
Well, I think that's part of it, Popeye. But back in the 70s, I don't think they had that agenda because they were going with the melting ice. Here's what was interesting. Over 13% of the world's undiscovered oil is in that area, and a lot of people are unaware of this. China, Russia, and the U.S. government all have their militaries in that area, and right now they're jockeying over who gets the shipping lanes in that region. It's a very important geopolitical point on the planet. So yes, there appears to be a Cold War going on in that region, and we have militaries up there. So the idea is to melt the ice, and then you can start pumping out oil, and Shell oil is already up there. They're now using, because of the ice melt, they're now pumping out oil, and shipping lanes have opened up. And Russia is very interested again, as well as the U.S., and as well as China. So no question that there are geopolitical and monetary interests to be in that region. So I think that's why they started. But when it started melting, they saw another opportunity getting into what you just spoke about, and it's a very effective way to sell this idea of CO2 global warming to the public. And I will say this, anyone who is pushing CO2 global warming, and that's the IPCC and the corporate governmental conglomerate way of forming global governance, moving forward with Agenda 21 objectives in everything that they've been working hundreds of years for. This is the biggest fraud that has ever perpetuated humanity, and I'll tell you why. Because the very people who are selling the weather patterns and the Arctic ice melt as proof of CO2 know damn well that geoengineering is going on. And they're not bringing that into the equation. And bottom line is this. There's a lot of debate whether the Arctic is melting, whether the planet is warming or cooling. And my question is, how in the world could we get an accurate reading of the planet's temperature with this geoengineering going on? And the answer to that question is we can't. We can't. So if they're not bringing this into the equation, I'm sorry. That's called fraud. You're selling something. You're talking about people's lives here. You're talking about trillions of dollars transferred. You're talking about cap and trade. And I'm not sure if people are aware of what cap and trade is, but the idea is cutting people's carbon footprint down. We breathe carbon. We use carbon in our automobiles. Everybody. It's the basic building block of life. So everybody uses carbon. Of course, on the oil paradigm, which could have been, taken down 100 years ago with Tesla technology, there's cleaner technologies. There have been. And the very people who are running the show and calling for this cap and trade are well aware of this. So it's very fraudulent. But where was I? So we're talking about cap and trade is this. What they want to do is limit each and every one of ours ability to use a certain amount of carbon. And many people have these new smart meters, and that's a whole nother story in terms of the damage that they do. But those smart meters can report back to the power companies what vacuum cleaner you're using, what other technologies in your home. And of course, what it looks like they're going to do is make people become standardized and purchase certain products. So it's complete control in the home, not only by the products that you're going to use, but when you keep your lights on. And you might just get fined if you keep a light on and go to work. That smart meter might just tell on you, and there might be a fine associated with that. So we're looking at a huge transfer of wealth. And the reason it's called cap, I believe, is because the amount of carbon that we're able to use will be capped. And the reason it's called trade is if you have a lot of money, you can buy carbon credits and use more carbon. You can buy a bigger house. You can drive more. And Al Gore just put together a proposal, and it fits right in with Agenda 21 objectives, to redesign. He asked for $90 trillion to redesign every major city in America. Why does he want to do that? Because he wants to ban automobiles so that we're all on public transportation. Isn't that wonderful? And it's all based on CO2 as being a cause of climate change. Let me tell you something. I'm not sure about CO2. I don't even need to be. I know it's fraudulent based on the fact that geoengineering is occurring on a daily basis. It's offsetting our weather patterns, and it has melted the ice in the Arctic. No question about it.
And I look, I want the average layman to think about this for a minute. How could taxing you more money, how could taxing a corporation, a company, whatever, even an individual, more money, how's it going to stop the the scary weather beast. How is that supposedly going to stay? It's not. It's a scam. They're just using it to scare you to get more money. It's like revenue generation. But what I worry about is these guys aren't very, and a lot of times, some of them think, I guess they do think, because I always say they think 5, 10, 20 years into the future, but they often don't think about the repercussions of their actions. You know what I mean? Like, this is brought to you by the same people that brought to you the Iraq invasion, which they planned for the invasion only up to the point of actually putting boots on the ground. I mean, they didn't even give the guys armored vehicles going in the initial invasion. They didn't even plan on what they were going to do with the country after they took it over and toppled the government that was currently in charge. And these are the very same people that are doing this with the weather modification. I mean, Mike, I've brought this up 1,000 times before. The Trinity test. Half the people involved with that were convinced they were going to ignite the atmosphere of the planet when they lit that atomic weapon off out in the desert. And they went ahead and did it anyway. That's scary. That's mad scientist type insanity. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. It's absolutely insane, and that's what we're dealing with geoengineering. Because, based on everything that I've researched, I'm convinced that this is the most damaging. These are the most damaging programs. Just if we look at the weather control aspect that we've ever, it's the biggest issue that we have ever had to face in the history of the planet, and this fits into all of their agendas, the global warming, the geoengineering, and essentially what it is consolidating more power into the hands of the few, because this is the excuse for establishing global governance. And a lot of people are unaware of this, but this year, 2015, there are 500 climate laws scheduled to go into effect. And they look pretty good, Popeye, but it's based on the CO2 deception. Don't tell me global warming or climate change is CO2 until you address geoengineering. Because, again, I want to stress this. There's no possible way that we can or anybody can get accurate temperature readings. We don't know if the planet's warming or cooling. Now I'm going to drop in why I believe that there's this polar vortex putting warmer air up into the Arctic. And no question the polar vortex is there. It's engineered. It's creating drought in California. California is burning down, unable to grow foods. So we have the interdependence on other countries, and then we have this getting the water resources. California was the starting point essentially for Agenda 21. So that was the area that they wanted to go in. Of course, when you drought out an area, you can bring in all of these limitations. You can convince people of cap and trade and, of course, limit people's freedoms. And that's really what's going on. But we look at the jet stream. Where's it going? Instead of California, up into the Arctic. And here's what I believe. And again, this might be debatable. However, I believe some of the ice is coming back. And based on that, they're very close to establishing world government. And they're going into treaties. They're working on treaties. They're going to try and tie it all together in France this year and get a UN treaty going. It's based on global warming or climate change. And if that ice comes back, guess what? I'm sorry, there is no global warming. The ice has come back. So I think they're trying to keep it warmer up in that region. There's no question they have the ability to do it, and there's no question, based on my article, again, Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic, they had the agenda to do it. So there's monetary, geopolitical reasons for this. But right now, that's
Mikey,
again.
Mikey, I'm gonna pause this right there because the break is sneaking up. But I want you to pause right there. When we get back, I want to reiterate this point again because this is really interesting, and I think people need to think about this. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment tonight's live edition, DTRH, hanging out with Michael Murphy, discussing geoengineering and weather manipulation. When we went to break, Mike was making a point about could they be keeping the Arctic warm, because if the Arctic ice keeps coming back the way it is, it just totally destroys their theory of, oh my God, global cooling. Or excuse me, global warming, because now it's global cooling. It was global cooling 20 years ago. Now it's global warming, and then it'll just switch back to global cooling, hence climate change. They move the goalposts. They changed the terminology. Now they refer to it as climate change and say, well, you're a climate change denier. Well, that's hard to fight. That's a huge straw man. That's hard to fight because the climate changes, right? So if you say, well, no, that's not true, even though you're saying their argument isn't true, they're saying, oh, you're saying that the climate doesn't change. What are you, a moron? See how straw man arguments are made, ladies and gentlemen? Logical fallacies. That's what that is. They move the goalposts and they just change the terminology. And people fall for it. The climate is changing. There are natural cycles, but they're also manipulating the weather. So that throws everything out of balance. When you have a bunch of mad scientists from these B-rated movies that we used to watch, again, when we were kids, these crazy mad scientists, the guy with the crazy hair and the glasses, and these are the idiots that are actually in charge. Like I said, the Trinity test in New Mexico, more than 50% of the people involved in it were actually convinced they were going to ignite the atmosphere on fire. And I mean the entire atmosphere of the planet. Some of them thought that they were going to crack the earth in half. These were scientists, and this was actually what they believed, and they went, screw it, push that red button anyway. That's the mindset of the psychos that we're dealing with. Anyway, Mike, I want you to reiterate your point again that you were getting into before we went to break about the could this be the purposeful keeping of the Arctic warm in order to push this upcoming UN treaty?
Popeye, I certainly believe that is a big part of it. And again, we have an agenda that's been going on for a very long time. It's global governance, but plus this oppressive world government. Climate change is the issue that is expected to bring this all together, because what do we all have in common? Well, the climate. It's a world issue. So we see a number of different agendas, such as the fruits and vegetables, and that creating a global marketplace, even the internet, and of course we use that, and it enables us to share information, but it also creates a need for a government body that would oversee that. And that's kind of the idea. So it's the Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution, and of course that's what happened in the Arctic. So, start melting the Arctic to get to the resources. Oh my God, the Arctic's melting. We have global warming. It's caused by you, people. It's caused by you. So because it's caused by you, we have to tax you. And people freely give up their money. They freely give up their freedoms, just like what they did with 9/11. People were, well, hey, man, I don't mind giving up freedoms, and I don't mind doing this. Well, look where it's bringing us. And it's bringing us into this very oppressive world government. And there's no question geoengineering plays a major role, if not all of the role, in the climate change that we've seen. And again, I will honestly call CO2 global warming the biggest fraud. I don't know if CO2 causes global warming. I don't believe it does. However, it's fraudulent because the establishment is not including this into the equation. So it would be like going to an accountant not bringing 50% of your income into the equation, and here's your percentage that you get, or after going into work, and they leave out a large percentage of the hours that you have worked, and that's what's going on. Again, this is a very important, if not the most important aspect of climate change. Without question, it is creating climate change, and it's being left out in the equation. So it's very concerning to us. And this year, it's very concerning because there are millions of people who hit the streets. I think it was October, demanding that our public officials, quote unquote, address climate change. There are only a couple of stragglers in Congress right now who are not going along with the agenda, but it looks like they almost have it locked up, at least in the U.S. And, of course, the Obama administration is saying climate change is a national security threat. So if they can't get the Congress and the Senate to go along with this, he might pull some executive orders to go about it. And there also was it David Cameron, I think it was David Cameron, who said climate deniers are a bigger threat than ISIS. You know what he's calling us? He's calling us terrorists. You know why? What they want to do is make it illegal to speak out against this. That's how certain they are, and that's how strong they're going after this agenda. So free speech, I think our time's very limited right now because, again, they're starting to call us terrorists, anybody that would question this. And if we look back, the name Stephen Schneider keeps on coming up. He was killed, or it appears he was murdered in a freakish murder like many of the scientists back in 2013. Again, he was the person who was really pushing these agendas. And he went on a very aggressive campaign towards anybody who would question the issue of global warming. So scientists that have spoken up, such as ClimateGate, have gotten fired. Some of them, I believe, have gotten killed. So it's very taboo to speak against this, especially if you're working in the establishment. So again, there is an agenda to keep people's mouths shut, and it's very unfortunate.
And there's, I would say, almost like at this point, COINTEL style tactics going on too, to keep people quiet about what's going on and to destroy people's characters.
Well, if we look at cognitive infiltration, that's Cass Sunstein. He's an Obama czar. Cognitive infiltration was a means to infiltrate, quote-unquote, conspiracy theory movements. So that would be 9/11 Truth movements, other movements. And what was interesting, in this paper, Cass Sunstein's cognitive infiltration, he specifically spoke about bringing the global warming issue into creating division in these movements. And, of course, we saw that come in, without question, into the chemtrail-geoengineering movement, big time. And it did create a lot of division.
And you yourself have been actually one of the people that's been attacked. Now, what's the modus operandi here? What are they trying to push the as you would say, and for those of you that are interested in what Mike was just talking about, you should read actually David Ray Griffin's book about that whole white paper that Cass Sunstein put out. It's called Cognitive Infiltration. You should read the book. He destroys that paper. I mean, he exposes everything, shows you what they're doing, and explains it with logic and empirical evidence. You can't deny it. It's right there. And then you see all this stuff going on since they even admitted this. And you see a lot of things getting 9/11 Truth kind of getting put to the wayside. The chemtrail/geoengineering community having, kind of a bit of a shake-up and problems going on. This is COINTEL style infiltration 101. So, Mikey, your thoughts on this and what you've been through, if you want to cover it a little bit, and what other activists have been through too, just so the listeners kind of have an understanding of what's actually going on to all you people that are speaking truth to power about this.
Yeah, I think it's kind of out in the open. I don't want to get too much into it, but I wrote an article after being, a target of many, ruthless character assassinations, several hundred private phone calls, phone calls to all of my supporters, to all of my radio contacts, or most of them, trying to get people to withdraw their support, and it was effective for a while and bouncing back, so that was good. But, it was interesting because the issue, this was somebody that we promoted, right, heavily in our films and also the website, and we promoted the website based on this agreement, and the agreement was that due to the fact that global warming has about a 60-40 issue of division, that we would not address the global warming issue because of our concerns that it would create division in the movement. That agreement was made. I promoted it, put it in front of millions of people. And then, the person tried to get me to go along with it. And I refused to do that. And there were a lot of more details. You can read Co-opting, or you can actually listen to Co-opting of a Movement. That was a radio show that I had done on Sage of Quay, or put in Michael Murphy's Sage of Quay. Not to get too much into the drama, but I think it's important to recognize what we could be dealing with. So when I wouldn't go along with that agenda and bring in global warming, and of course it was entered in to the movement. Now there's all kinds of division, people arguing over this. So whatever the motive was, I can only speculate, and I don't even think that's important. It doesn't matter, what the motive was. The issue's there. It's creating division. We're seeing all these arguments and everything else. And that was Cass Sunstein's, again, his idea of bringing this specific issue into movements to create division. So, it's very skeptical to me. But anyways, I would not, again, go along with that agenda, and I was attacked quite a bit. And, it was interesting. A number of other leading activists or leading people that we had in our film who held, a belief that global warming was a deliberate fraud, they got attacked very heavily on this person's website and publicly a lot on other radio shows. So, the concern of mine is this. I kind of looked at that, and I kind of looked at the dynamics, and then I started looking at there are 500 new climate laws scheduled to go into effect. Where are the people in the geoengineering movement? They're not going in there. And I realized we are the one movement that has the ability to stop these programs. A lot of people don't realize, based on this global warming scam, the quickest, most effective thing to do is geoengineering. So the millions of people who are marching, they don't realize they're marching just begging to get sprayed. And that is the next step. And let me tell you something. We are the movement that has the power and ability, the only movement to go in there to educate these scientists about geoengineering and the fact that it is the cause of climate change. And when we do that, that is the key. It's literally the key. So I noticed activists were like, we can't go into the climate meetings, it would create division in the movement. No. The division came in after I got attacked. That's when the division came in, because the issue was brought on the table and it was brought in front of millions of people. So the issue is there, the division is there. But people, if you're involved with the chemtrail-geoengineering issue, please, this is the year they're going to try and legalize it. We have to get into the climate meetings. We have to address this. And when people realize, when the scientists finally, the ones that are on the fence, when we go in there and talk to them and let them know geoengineering is the cause of the climate change, no question about that. And there's no way we can allow them to pass legislation based on CO2 global warming. So anyways, I do believe that that's probably the reason why it came in. And we saw other activists getting attacked, so aggressively. It was almost like Israel's agenda. If people criticize Israel, they get, hung publicly, being called anti-Semitics and racists and all this other stuff. And we had a very, very aggressive attacks on a lot of other activists, and it was coming from one source. So, can I prove what the agenda was? I can't. I can just tell you what I see. And, that's past. That's past us. What I ask the public to do, and the people who are involved in the movement, look at what not going in and addressing this issue in terms of it being a fraud does. Look what it does. It takes us away from addressing and exposing the lie and going in and getting these programs stopped. And that's the part of it. Now, is this person, is that the agenda? Again, I can only speculate. But what I can tell you, based on all the dynamics which me and a lot of other activists had experienced, we do believe, many of us do believe, that's absolutely the agenda. So I think we have a very important year. Our time is very short. I'm moving forward with the third film, and this third film is going to, without question, expose the global warming fraud, the CO2 fraud, and how it relates to geoengineering. And I think when we put the keys together, there will be no denying this, and they won't be able to pass the legislation. So that's how important it is. And normally, Popeye, I don't like getting into these issues, and a lot of people think it's personal issues. And I want to make this very clear. This is not a personal issue. There are personal issues, but that's not why I address it, okay? The movement was definitely infiltrated. It was diverted. It was co-opted. And the definition of co-opting is to divert from the initial purpose and cause, and it was. And I was called many things, including a drug addict. So everybody was, asking me what I was smoking and concerned about the composition of my blood. And I said, does any of my work indicate that there was a drug problem? And it doesn't. It doesn't. So that, what it essentially did was, instead of me focusing, and I was reaching about 2 million people per week, instead of me focusing on geoengineering, I was forced really to defend myself about issues that aren't even related to geoengineering. And it diverted the movement's attention onto that. And what I felt like this person did was essentially, I brought them up on stage, introduced them to everybody, and really my goal was to replicate myself, because I was, again, reaching about 2 million people. I said, hey, let's bring some other people up so that we can exponentially grow. And after I brought the person up, and there were a lot of dynamics, but they essentially, assassinated my character and tried to get people to think I was the worst person in the world, even wrote letters, from what I've heard, to different chemtrail groups, urging them to withdraw their support from me. So when they effectively assassinated my character, and it did, a lot of people were afraid, they initially withdrew their support. He took over that role in the movement and directed it into this global warming thing. That was something that we agreed would not come in to the movement, but it's there right now. So, yeah, it was a challenging year, a lot of challenges, and this is, there are a lot more dynamics. Again, go to Michael Murphy's Sage of Quay if you're interested in more but information about this, or if you even have questions about what I'm saying. Before making a judgment, I would ask that you would listen to that radio show and, again, look at, has the chemtrail-geoengineering movement been co-opted? I don't mention names, even though my name has been dragged across many internets, many radio shows and everything else. I don't think the names are important. What I think is important is that people identify behavior that's damaging to our cause. And when we identify that, we really have to identify it as something that really is against everything that we've worked so hard for. And a lot of people want to speculate what people's motives are, if you're coming in and doing these things, and everyone's like, do you think he was a paid agent? I don't know. I said, it looks like COINTEL Pro. I don't have any proof, and I don't care. If somebody is acting like an agent, or if somebody is carrying out all these behaviors that look like COINTEL Pro, should I allow him to continue? Should I continue working with him if he's not getting paid? If it's just a personality flaw? Absolutely not. We've worked way too hard. We have too much on the line. This is the future of humanity. It literally is. And if somebody is making mistakes at this level on this issue, they got to get out of here. You got to get them out, because we don't have time to make these mistakes. Again, 2015 is the instrumental year for stopping this legislation. I think this is the year, and that's why I'm moving forward. I don't know how I'm going to make the film Popeye. I have no idea where the resources are coming from, but I've already started putting together an outline. And my goal is to get this ready so that we can put a call to action out for the dance in France. So that would be we believe they're trying to put together a climate treaty. Max Bliss has been putting together some really, really important information about that. And he did go into a climate meeting, and he said, a lot of the scientists were on the fence. A lot of them, really just needed somebody to educate them. And I think, if you look at where the governments are going, where the scientists are going, as Al Gore would say, the science is settled. We have a consensus. No, there's not a consensus. There is not. And we're talking about really a fundamental change in the way that we live. And these changes are going to be, what they plan anyways, so dramatic. And it will relate to population control. It will relate to controls in all forms of our life. And again, a transfer of trillions of dollars of wealth into the hands of a few. So if you have money, you'll be able to live a free life. Maybe you'll be able to drive. Maybe you'll be able to, have a big home. If you don't, you're going to have a very small carbon footprint or allowance to live. And what they want to do, and I think you're aware of this, Popeye, they want to put us through Agenda 21 programs into little boxes. They want to create these cities and stuff people into small places, and that makes people more controllable. And that's what the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, that's what the agenda is. And if we don't seriously take a look at what's going on, not only in the chemtrail-geoengineering movement, but look at what's going on the geopolitical level and why this is a fraud. And again, I'm going to say it again, CO2, global warming, whoever is pushing that is engaged in the biggest fraud to perpetuate humanity. And the reason why is because nobody who is pushing that is bringing geoengineering into the equation. And if they are not bringing geoengineering into the equation and just saying these adverse conditions are proof of CO2 global warming, then they're fraudulent. And that's what the system is doing. And again, they're about to pass laws which will change the entire future of humanity based on something that is leaving out the most important issue. So this is a very important time for us. And it's also a very exciting time within the movement because, we've had a pretty tough year as a group. A lot of division, a lot of people name-calling, and a lot of, unfortunately, public, character assassinations. Did I start them? Absolutely not. A lot of people are viewing this as, wow, I'd like to get involved with the chemtrail-geoengineering movement, but those two guys are fighting. For the record, these two guys are not fighting. I did not fight. I got punched for about 9 months. I got attacked publicly. I had all of my supporters called, and I was attacked on those phone calls. I was on front page of websites. They did a 2-hour radio show on me. No, it's not these two guys are fighting. I'm standing up and saying, wake up, people. And I have not only a right to do it, I have an obligation, and the reason is this. If we allow this bullying to continue, if we allow it to divert us from our common goal of getting geoengineering stopped, which we have, and we don't say anything, well, I think I'd be just as guilty as the oppressor. And what was the word said? It is not good men who will destroy the country. It's good men who say nothing that will allow the country to be destroyed. And when we face oppression, it's our duty and obligation to speak up about it. And it might not be pleasant. I didn't want this battle. I didn't start this battle, but it is a battle. And the oppression and the name-calling, all of these things continue on. And, it's unfortunate because now I have to alert organizers when I go out and speak. I have to say, there's a good chance that you'll probably get a phone call from somebody who will try to get you to withdraw your support. And a number of, events that I've been invited to speak at, they have gotten phone calls. So, that's concerning to us. However, I'm bringing this out into the public really to alert people to what can happen. And, if you get a phone call about me questioning it, you're not the only one who's gotten that phone call. We estimate a couple of hundred, actually. We estimate that a couple hundred, over 200 people had gotten phone calls, of this person trying to encourage them or, manipulate them into withdrawing their support. So it's very serious. And again, this is not some little club. It's not a Christmas club. This is serious stuff. These are geoengineering is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We are blowing the lid off of this issue. So, I really expected that I'd probably be more challenged right now. And this is, unfortunately, a little political. And I'm okay with that. I can, I'm very effective at doing this. And looking back, the way that I have addressed this, unfortunately, it's become very public. Again, I did not bring it to the public, but it is. And it's an issue that continues to go on, not only with me, but a number of other activists. So I want the audience to realize this is not about two guys fighting. This is about an issue. And it's about a movement in the direction that the movement's going in. And we have to recognize that and go where truth and integrity is. And those of us who speak truth with integrity historically have been attacked. Nobody's attacked my personal work. They've attacked, my private life and other things. And
well, that's how they do it, Mike. That's it. They attack the character. It's an ad hominem attack. It's a logical fallacy. It's used when there is no real argument, and it's used almost like a red herring to divert people away from the real issues. We got about a minute and a half left before the end of the broadcast. I want you to go ahead and plug all your websites again and anything else you want to plug. Go.
Yeah, really quick, whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com. But this person had stated, because he used the drug card, he said, I had to tell Michael's supporters because he was using money for drugs. Let me put this straight. My business partner, Barry Kulski, I posted a lot of unethical purchases of donated money. Now all the donated money is gone. Did they come out and say anything about that if they were so concerned about donated funds? I didn't spend any of that money unethically. I handled all business transactions, all donations in a very ethical manner. However, if that were truly the cause, where were these people when the proof came out about missing funds? I'm not sure if that made sense.
No, it did. I understand what you meant. I wish we had more time to continue on it. Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming on again tonight, brother.
Hey, Popeye, God bless you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Ladies and gentlemen, go check out Mike's movies. What and why in the world are they spraying? Easiest place to find him is on YouTube. Spread the information about geoengineering, weather manipulation. It must be real if they're catching that much flack. Like the World War II bomber pilots say, you get the most flack when you're over target. We're out of here, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. I love you all. I believe in you all. Let's go save the world. I'll see you again Thursday.